minutes either.
Yeah.
I was shocked.
He showed up.
He's not public. He's a partner.
Okay, Rocky, we should be on. Well, I can always use this mic, just. Good morning, Commissioner Thomas. Good morning, Commissioner Flynn.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Just so you know, we're already up on YouTube Live, just for your information.
Okay, I am going to mute myself until we get started.
Good thinking.
Yeah, I can do that too for this one. I'll just unmute it before we begin.
Is Mary there?
Hello.
Hey, Mary, did you get my note last night?
I did about the senator or the representative name.
Yeah, Representative Seitz.
Yes, I will make that correction.
Thank you.
You're the only one with corrections this month, so I've noted a few. And we'll get them all fixed before Brad signs off on them.
Just blame it on COVID.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Whatever happened.
Hello, Mary. I thought I saw an email flash on my screen this morning from you, but now I can't find it. Did you send me something this morning?
I only was confirming that I received your correction to the minutes
Okay,
about including the section from law.
okay,
So I will do that too,
okay, thanks.
because I think you're right there.
Thank you.
No problem.
I'll look and see, because it just seems to have disappeared. Thank you.
No problem.
I have two things I want to bring up. Just so you're not.
Directors are in the,
Yeah, right.
director's conference.
Susie, just for reference.
Are we online yet?
Yes, we are, just for reference,
I won't
we are
bring that up.
technically in a special meeting, so you can bring up anything you like in commissioners' comments, it cannot be deliberated.
It can't be what?
Deliberated, there can't be a discussion amongst commissioners, but you are free to say anything that you would like during commissioner comments.
So good, it's good to be.
Is it, Mary, wasn't it anything outside of the day that was previously announced? Correct. So if we do not meet on our regularly scheduled day, it is
Special.
So,
The only thing that we can do is alter the time on the day without.
so we're going back, though, starting in August, aren't we?
To our normal schedule, hopefully, right?
Yeah, this one we would have been in regular session, but it didn't work out with the
Scheduling.
commissioners. So we would have been.
Good job of getting this all set up.
Hello, Kara.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about what you just said because I was confused about this. This is a special meeting because it's not happening on our regularly scheduled day.
Yes, ma'am.
So how does the regular scheduled meeting that didn't happen, how does it get reported? Is it a canceled meeting or what?
It's canceled.
Ann Shuley is representing us from the city solicitor's office today, but I believe that that is the official, that is how we officially look at it, Linda, is that it was canceled,
Okay. So
not rescheduled.
that meeting was canceled. This is a special meeting, and because it's a special meeting, we can bring up topics, but there can be no discussion or no deliberation of a topic that is not included in the agenda in a special meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
That's correct.
Okay. That's interesting.
Aaron,
I would say
Mike, you might be, that's on.
Is
Is it- Can they hear me well? May I ask, I'm the furthest away from the mic. Can you guys hear me clearly? Anybody on the call? Rocky saying yes.
A little bit of an echo, but we can hear you.
I can hear you, but it's not terribly clear.
She's
Why
gonna
don't
do
you
a
say-
great big.
You could,
Yes, here,
Well, they're the mics, these little guys.
the mics are the phones.
Oh, I thought.
These are the
mics were
speakers here.
No, these are,
speakers.
oh, that's why you're getting feedback.
yeah, if it's too close to the
Oh,
speaker, it
okay.
might give a little, yeah.
There you go.
It's okay, I'll just use my teacher voice.
Okay, it is 9:02. Let's call the meeting officially to order. Oh, that's right, roll call, thank you. Forgot we're still in that mode.
President Linder,
Here,
Vice President Getz.
Here,
Commissioner Castellini,
Here,
Commissioner Flynn,
Here,
Commissioner Thomas.
Here,
okay, now that we're all here, there are no public comments submitted, so we will skip straight to the approval of the July 7th special meeting minutes. Are there any alterations or changes that haven't been submitted to Mary as of yet? Okay, so, yeah, go ahead.
yes, I did submit a request for an addition to the minutes. And it goes to the discussion we were just having previously about inclusion of comments in a special meeting. And that was not reflected in the minutes. Mary has the comment that I suggested relative to our discussion or the question about Eaton Park and the road closure and the decision of the the instruction from law around having that topic discussed at a special meeting. And my request was to have that noted and to have it noted that staff agreed to have an update at our next regular meeting, which this is not, because it's a special meeting. So that'll happen at some point in the future. Just wanted to make note of that.
Okay,
President Linder and Commissioner Thomas, that is, that update will be included today in the staff comments from Mr. Merz. So we will have that update for you. We are planning to have that update to you in the staff comments.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. I'm glad to hear the information, but I'm just a little bit confused about how that gets deliberated. Is it just a discussion and not a deliberation because this is a special meeting? Just trying to understand this process.
Yes. Commissioner Thomas, that would have then been my misunderstanding. I was under the impression that the commissioners wanted an update rather than a discussion, but to your point, if following the update today, you would still like to have a discussion, that will need to be on the next agenda.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
My apologies if there was miscommunication.
okay, any other comments about the minutes of the last special meeting that we had?
Yeah, Mr. President,
Yes, Kevin.
my change was simply to change the spelling of the representative that helped us get the extension, because there could be confusion because there is a Representative Sykes in the Ohio House. She's a Democrat from Cleveland, and it was Bill Seitz, a Republican from Green Township, Hamilton County, that helped us. So.
Okay, thank you. So with those notations added to the minutes, can we have a motion to approve as submitted?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor? Oh, roll call. Yes. Here we go.
President Linder.
It only took me this far to catch myself. I'm getting better. Yes, aye, or whatever. Yeah.
Vice President Guest,
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini,
Yes.
Commissioner Flynn,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right, thank you. Now we're on to new business, and the first order of that business is a discussion about the Moorline House lease.
Yes. President Linder, if I could frame this, and then I'd like to hand it over to our CFO, Mr. Sherman. You know, as we all have been impacted differently through COVID and through the pandemic, our partners at the Moorline Logger House have come forward with a request for us. And we have with us not only our CFO, Craig Sherman, we also have Mr. Greg Hardman with us from Moorline Logger House in order to answer any questions that you have. So they have made a request for us on the agenda today is a discussion so that you can provide a direction for staff to proceed. Mr. Sherman, would you frame the ask a little bit further, please?
Yeah, so a little background behind this. Moorline Logger House opened up in February 25th, 2012. It's across the street from Great American Ballpark. And then Mr. Hartman, the president and CEO of Christian Moorline Brewing Company, sent a request to the Cincinnati Park Board on July 8th, requesting a reduction in the base rent to manageable fair market value and additional waiver of lease payments for 2020 and up to April of 2021 until pretty much opening day next year. When Moorline was being built, there was a projected revenue that was going to be close to 12 million when the restaurant opened. Reality is the restaurant generates around 7.6 million pre-pandemic. And during this time, recently, Mr. Hartman has been working to refinance the Moreline finances through PNC Bank, and through that, PNC had an appraisal performed on the land lease, and they projected the land lease they are currently paying is 55.6% above fair market value per that appraisal that PNC paid for. And that is in one of the attachments for this board report. Mr. Hartman is requesting that the lease be reduced by 50%, where it would be an annual lease of $112,500. Staff is asking for the commissioners to discuss and consider ML Moreline Logger House request on reducing the base rent and additionally waiving the lease for them during this pandemic.
Okay, let's get the discussion started. Does anybody have any feelings, comments? Want to start off, or I can chime in, Kevin? No?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I participated with Craig in an early meeting with Mr. Hartman, and I'm very sympathetic to Mr. Hartman. I love Christian Moreline beer. I love the things that Greg has done in Cincinnati with bringing back some of the old Cincinnati brands that, you know, he was a craft beer aficionado before such a thing existed in Cincinnati. He was really the original craft brewer. That being said, yeah, first of all, the appraisal that submitted was an appraisal that was done by PNC Bank for lending purposes. It wasn't done for purposes of valuing the ground lease. And I think that we would be remiss in accepting a 50% reduction for the next 31 years or 30 years, because we're completely forgiving it, at least at the request, by cutting what was an arm's length transaction done not all that long ago in half. And I think it's a bad assumption to say that your base rent is strictly based on anticipated sales. That's never the way that leaseholds are negotiated. Certainly, if they were making $18 million a year at the Moreline House, they wouldn't be expecting the park board to come back to us and say, we think we deserve to double your rent. So I'm not unsympathetic to some reduction related to the pandemic, the unanticipated pandemic, and I think we've already given some relief by allowing the use of the Schmidlap lawn area without charge so that people could socially distance and eat outside at the Logger House and drink outside at the Logger House. I'm also not completely unsympathetic to some short-term reduction, but during this period of time that the Moreline House revenue has been less than what they anticipated, they've also significantly paid down what their investors invested in, the cash that the investors invested in the business. So it seems a little backwards to be saying those that are owners of the business, those that are investing in the business, get paid before the landlord gets paid. That's the opposite of the way that it should work. I don't know what the correct number is, and I don't know what the correct rent relief is, but we shouldn't be giving away park assets for free. And we shouldn't be giving them away for the next 30 years. Because even if the sales right now are below that number, that's no guarantee that they'll be below that number for the next 30 years.
Thank you, Kevin.
President Linder, to Commissioner Flynn's comment of don't know what the reg should be. Mr. Sherman, can you please explain the correspondence that you've had with the city solicitor's office and their recommendations to us to work with Moreline Logger House to obtain an assessment? Can you please explain how we have approached this so far as staff?
Yeah, so it was late last year that we were approached by Mr. Hartman for a reduction. That's where Commissioner Flynn and I met with the city solicitor's office and the real estate office. And we had a meeting downtown at City Hall. And really what came out of that meeting was what Mr. Commissioner Flynn was talking about, was the 10% being paid to the investors. The investors own about $2 million of the business. And with that, and that's kind of where it was tabled for that. The city solicitor's office in real estate, they requested that Moreline, Mr. Hartman, Moreline Logger House have an appraisal. Well, during this time, they're looking at refinancing. So through PNC Bank is where they obtained their appraisal.
I'd like to comment if I could. This is Greg Hardman. In regards to the appraisal that was given, there is a specific section regarding land lease. So it actually, PNC wanted to take a look at the land lease as well. So that
Mr. Hardman?
Mr. Hartman.
I apologize. We have not heard anything since Mr. Sherman's last comment about the city solicitor's recommendation. And I greatly apologize, we couldn't hear you. Craig, can you make the comment again about the recommendation from the solicitor's office? And then I'm very sorry that we cut both of you off.
Yes, back in, it was February of 2020, or even before, I think it's February 2020. We met with the real estate, Commissioner Flynn and I and Mr. Hartman met with the city solicitor as well as the real estate department down at City Hall. And through our meeting during that time, identified that investors that own about $2 million, that have $2 million invested at Moreline Logger House get paid about 10% annually on that return. So because of that, that was why it was tabled, because the investors were not taking really any decreases, but they were, Mr. Hartman, they were asking for us to reduce our lease. So that's why it was tabled back in early 2020. And Mr. Hartman requested on July 8th a reduction. And that's where I definitely want to bring it up to the commissioners and have a full discussion in regards to this request.
And Craig, one more time, can you say what the solicitor's office requested from us or requested from Moreline Logger House in terms of an assessment?
Yes, they requested the appraisal. And that was provided to them by Mr. Hartman.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I am fully in support of discussions with Moreline Logger House. I think it is a great asset to have their restaurant on Smale Park. But as Commissioner Flynn said, that being said, I'm not a development guy. I'm not someone that's in tune with current market rates and that sort of thing. But I think there are people in the city that are. So from our discussion today, I would just like it known that personally, I would like to agree that we would negotiate and discuss the lease with Moreline Lager House. And my recommendation would be to have staff continue to pursue discussions with Lager House and come back to us after a better understanding of all people of what the current market conditions are, et cetera. And at our next meeting, come back with a specific recommendation for the lease, because I'm not a commercial guy, and but I do want to let my opinion known that with the Lager House, I would like to recommend we do negotiate with them, and that we do what we can to be sure that our lease with them is economically fair and reflective of current market conditions.
Thank you, Jim. I would just, concur with both Kevin and Jim's point of view that I think, these unusual circumstances, we need to take some action. Also agree that with Kevin that 30 years might be a bit long for that, and would also support Jim's recommendation to kind of get down in the weeds and start to figure out what that right term is, and talk about it at the next meeting.
I would just add that we need to have an appropriate appraisal done. The appraisal done by PNC Bank, we're being told, is not the appropriate appraisal. It's only for lending money, not for value.
Kevin?
Yeah, I just to follow up on Commissioner Castellini's comment, the page 16, the first page of the executive summary says that the intended users are PNC Bank, its successors and/or assigns. Intended use, the intended use and user of our report are specifically identified our report. No other use or user of this report is permitted by any other party or any other purpose. So this was not done for purposes of valuing the land lease for purposes of determining what the appropriate rent should be. Appraisals are an art form as much as they are a science. And if you put a cap rate, as they did on this, they gave a range of capitalization rates of somewhere, I think, between 5.6% and 8.25%. And they picked the 8.25% to value the land lease. They gave no explanation of why they chose that rate as opposed to the lower capitalization rate or somewhere in the middle. But the higher the cap rate, the lower the value of the land. So there really needs to be, as Commissioner Castellini said, a hard look at this number before we just accept it, and again, accept that the value of that land is never going to go up in the next 30 years.
So that begs the question, how and who do we determine to do this appraisal? I would not suggest the city. They have a certain approach to appraisals that may not be the most fair, or certainly they have a bias, but any recommendations as to sourcing the appraisal?
My suggestion would be to discuss that with law. They do have an appraisal department at the city. One of the things that we are required to do is that we're required to, when we enter into new documents, is to sell the land or lease the land at fair market value as determined by an appraisal. And typically that's done with the city's appraisal department. I don't know whether law will say, yeah, that they're fine, or whether it needs to be somebody else. But there's lots of appraisers out there that have the value of this. Again, it may be that they don't need a full appraisal. Perhaps they can dig into the guts of the PNC appraisal and come up with their own number and give a range. And again, on a short-term basis, I'm not opposed to giving some relief here. Especially related to the COVID-19, but also this request came in prior to the COVID-19 virus hitting. Christian Moerlein felt that the lease number was too high, and we've seen that down at the banks, that there have been a lot of bars that have opened and restaurants that have opened and closed down at the banks. It's a tough business, as Mr. Hardman knows better than I. So there have been sales of the land down there. I would just be very worried to tie us into cutting our payments, because those payments support our park down there, and they support the operations that help to make the banks, including the Moerlein House, successful. If we don't have the money to pay to keep Smale a first-class operation because we've cut our operating income from Smale, we're going to be in trouble, because and Christian Moerlein will be in trouble, because people aren't going to want to come there because it's not a first-class operation. So I don't have an answer for you, Mr. President, as to exactly who the correct appraiser should be, but I think law can tell us.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President,
Yes, Commissioner Thomas.
just for the record, this is hardly my area of expertise. And so I appreciate the comments and the additional input from Commissioner Flynn and the others who have already spoken on this. The concern that I had as I was reviewing the documents was I absolutely was not in favor of any kind of reduction that would be in place, or adjustment that would be in place for the next 30 years. That just seemed not appropriate in my mind. However, I do believe it is right, as others have said, to continue the negotiations. So hopefully we can get to a place that works for both of us. These, to me, are two separate items that have become conflated. The first one is the whole discussion about the reduction over time in the lease agreement. I think that is one issue. The other one is, what do we do in the face of COVID, and what kind of relief, if you will, we are willing to consider relative to this situation. So I don't want to get those two things mixed up, because I think they're two separate questions that we ought to be dealing with separately.
Thank you.
One other question I would have, they're using our event lawn free of charge, correct?
Yeah.
To have outside dining. What would the rent be on that if we were renting it to them for that purpose?
Craig, are you able to comment? I don't have those numbers memorized. Craig, are you able to recall what the rental rate is? There is a kind of a rental rate and then a reduced rate that we would offer to our partners.
No, I do not know that rate. Mr. Hartman may know that rate. I don't know if Mrs. Mobley, Jenny Mobley's on the call.
Jenny is not with us today. I'm sorry.
I do have information regarding that. It is in regards to a third of the lawn, and we do have a contract rate within there. I believe it would be $1,500 per day. And We have tried to use the lawn to the best of our ability. It obviously is very weather related. The business down in that area, for us at least, is off a dramatic number versus a year ago, as we don't have any major special events going on and or any major sporting events. So we have not been able to utilize that, and our revenue is off approximately 61% at the moment.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I think, given our discussion today, if I'm hearing what everybody's saying, I think we are all in a position where we want to work with Moreline and determine that we have a fair and equitable. And I agree with Commissioner Thomas as well, that these are two different issues. And what I would say, since each of us, outside of probably Commissioner Flynn and you to some extent, don't have a whole lot of experience in negotiating commercial leases. So I would again recommend that we now have given input to staff and we've expressed some of our concerns. And I would ask that we ask staff to come back in 30 days, because I would at our next regular meeting, because I do think this is an important topic that needs to be addressed timely.
Yep.
So I would recommend that we ask staff to come back at our next meeting with a recommendation for the lease terms.
I think that's an excellent choice of plan of attack. So I guess we don't need to have a motion on that, do we?
No.
Yeah, okay. All right, any other comments before we move on from the lease discussion?
President Linder, I do have a question in regards to, okay, yes, we'll be following up with the law department and requesting them to provide some numbers for us, as well as I do want to point out, I did reach out to economic development as well to see what their input is. In regards to the waiving the lease, do we want to postpone that, or reduction of the lease, postpone that till August, or is that something we want further discussion on?
I think we want to postpone that till the August discussion. And if we can get information covering both of those issues, I think we hopefully will be able to make a decision at the next meeting.
But there are two questions that have been asked. One has to do with the lease, and the other has to do with forgetting the rent during COVID.
Yes.
And we will provide a recommendation for both of those.
Why do I think that the government or the mayor or somebody has said that we are to forgive rent until July 31st or something like that?
Yeah.
Am I making it up?
I don't know.
You're making that up.
Well, we look forward to continuing to work with Mr. Hardman, and we will present you with our recommendations at the August regular meeting.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Greg. Run a great operation. You're a good partner for us, so we certainly recognize that.
Well, thank you so much for your consideration. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg.
Buy more beer.
Okay, on to the next agenda item is the all funds budget. Craig, you're just going to walk us through that.
Yes, thank you, President Linder. Okay, for the fiscal year 2021 all funds budget, as everybody's well aware of what's occurring due to COVID, the estimated general fund deficit for the city is estimated 73.4 million going into fiscal year 2021. And this is something that's definitely going to hinder us as well in fiscal year 2022. So it's going to be interesting to see how everything plays out, especially with all the work at home that's occurring, to see how many of those positions actually come back to the city and how that's going to impact the budget for years to come. So for the budget overview, so in fiscal year 2020, the all funds budget was at 25.4 million. And in fiscal year 21, the all funds budget was reduced to 22.3 million. That's a total reduction of around 2.4 million. I do want to highlight 1.4 million of that reduction are capital donations that are provided to us from the Parks Foundation that are not identified in the fiscal year 2021 budget, as well as a good portion of that 1.4 million was the 773,000 that was reallocated from Fund 318 Sawyer Point Fund into the capital budget for the fishing pier repair. So when you take those two items out, then you're looking at a reduction amount closer to $1 million. Within that, the general fund was reduced at 8.8%. So in fiscal year 2020, our general fund budget was around 9 million. And our fiscal year 2021 general fund budget was decreased to close to 8.3 million. That was roughly an 800,000 reduction. So within there, the park staff for the key reduction items, early retirement incentive program, that was about $230,000. This is for individuals that are looking to retire early and us not backfilling these positions. So working with the City Budget and Valuation Office, with the ERIP program, these are positions that we're not necessarily going to get back in 21 or 22. The elimination of any cost of living adjustment equated to about 53,000. Then we have 6 positions that were PBA, position based allowance, we will not be filling or potentially not be filling in fiscal year 2021. That equated to about 443,000. Each of those positions, it was deputy director was 136, storekeeper position about 37,000. The clerk typist was 70,000. 2 vacant floors positions was 113,000. And the assistant supervisor of fleet services was 87,000. So those all add up to that 443,000. Additionally, the Explore Nature program did perform an evaluation, and this is something that working with Jennifer Hartman, she's been looking at this for years, and through their evaluation, look at what other camps charge throughout the city and in the area. They knew for years that they were well below the market value. And they're looking at increasing those rates, and that'll help generate an additional 70,000, which will be used for staffing reimbursement. So that's something that, yes.
Do you know when the last time that rate increase occurred at the summer camp?
I am not aware of, Commissioner President Leonard, I am not aware of when they increased the rates the last time. In conversations with Jennifer, they've been wanting to increase the rates for a while, so I'm sure it's probably been years ago.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Thomas.
I had a question about that as well. Didn't know how you want, as we're going through this, do you want questions now or you want to wait? But I had a question about those rates as well, because and I think I sent you a note about this, Craig, that it seemed a 50% increase all in one step sounded like a lot, and a lot to, even though I understood that it was undervalued. I know that we went through last year an assessment of all of our fee producing assets and readjusted costs and memberships and so forth. And I just wondered how we missed this one. And if there are others we need to be taking a look at and maybe stepping towards the final increase we want to make, instead of in one step doing a 50% increase. But that's perhaps a discussion that we can have separately, but I just wanted to make note of that request.
Yes, President Leonard and Commissioner Thomas. Yes, this is something that Jennifer Hartman, she's been wanting this increase for years. And really this year, due to the reductions in that, that's why it's pushed forward to help us get us closer to market value. Now, not all camps, I will highlight, not all camps will increase by 50%. The overall average is 50%. So what they're targeting are camps that sell out relatively like quick. So whenever we open the camps up in February, they're sold out within 24 hours, 48 hours. So obviously there's a demand there. So part of this process is we see those increases is working with Rocky's team. We'll see how really registration goes in February for these camps. And if we identify they are not selling out or they're not selling out, then we can look at potentially making adjustments at that time. I do want to also highlight, even with the increases, we are still not at the really what you're seeing from other camps throughout the city. So we're still pretty good value for individuals, really good value for individuals to use. And we do have a waiver program for individuals that cannot afford the camps. So individuals that qualify can still attend the camps.
Mr. President.
Yes, Kevin.
That was one question I was going to ask was the waiver question. So I'm glad that you clarified that so that for people that can't afford, really truly can't afford it, they can still enjoy, the kids can enjoy the parks. On the admissions and fees number in the budget that we've got for fiscal year 2021, did that include the proposed reduction for the Moorline lease? I'm assuming that's where the lease.
No, that does not include the reduction.
So it would be an even greater loss, if you will, if we give the reduction.
Yes.
Okay, sorry to interrupt, Craig.
Oh, no, commissioners, that's fine. We'll move. Any more questions, commissioners, over the general fund? I'll move on to the infrastructure fund.
Well, I would just make a comment. If you look at the one page where you have all the details, you'll see obviously the biggest decrease in general fund, but as Kevin just mentioned, when you've got admissions and fees is half, there's really, that's economic driven. That's not anything that Parks has done. That's just a reality that with COVID and with things being shut down, half of what we're projecting as a decrease next year is coming from admissions and fees, and there's not a whole lot that we can do about that. I do want to point out that we, in the agreement with the city, we initially, as it relates to Lot 23, as you'll recall, commissioners had initially agreed that we would upfront funds out of our restricted funds, with the city saying that they would step up and do that so that we did not have to utilize close to $3 million of our restricted funds. We did make an agreement with them that you will notice that our funding from other restricted funds and distributions from our park endowments, we have a significant increase in those two to help offset some of the decrease that we have in the general fund. That general fund decrease is a little bit higher than what some other departments have, but that is because we have agreed with the city that we would utilize some of our restricted funds to help supplant some of our operating needs in exchange for them providing full upfront funding of the shortfall in funding that we had for Lot 23. So my only comments, I guess, before we move on, Craig, is that I think this is a realistic budget, and I think that the time and effort that Craig and his staff have put in reflects a reality
in what we have to look forward to next year. And I'm glad to see that it's not even a greater reduction from prior years based on the current environment of funding available from the city and just the loss of revenue that we are going to have in our park operation.
Thank you, Commissioner Getz. We'll go ahead and move forward with the infrastructure fund. It's 302. The fiscal year 20 income tax infrastructure fund was budgeted at around 1.8 million. In fiscal year 21, the income tax infrastructure fund was reduced to 1.6 million. This was a $224,000, about $250,000 reduction. With that, the variance is a position vacancy allowance. There's a regional manager vacant position that will be PVA'd for 12 months. That's gonna have the reduction of $93,656. There's a one-time salary reimbursement from the commissioner fund that was increased. That's $61,000. This is to pay for just reimburse for operational staff that perform work within the parks. And then the early retirement incentive program is at $70,114, adding up to about a quarter of a million.
Mr. President,
Yes, Commissioner Flynn.
the regional manager position, what region is that, and how is that going to be handled administratively? I mean, it seems like the person that's in charge of the entire region not being there could be a problem.
Mr. Chair, that position was the position that was formerly occupied by Mr. Larry Parker. He was the regional manager for the West District. It's currently, that position is currently being, there's a temporary transfer of one of our employees who's doing that, but we have been, since Mr. Parker's promotion to division manager, have been considering, and through the ERIP program, we're going to need to continue to consider a restructuring, which will, right now we have an east, a west, a central, and a riverfront. And we will be looking at combining some of those responsibilities. So Commissioner Flynn, we are expecting to absorb those responsibilities, both with our current staff in the short term and then through restructuring efforts beginning January 1 of next year. So we have a plan. I guess we have a loose plan at the moment.
Okay, Craig, continue, please.
We'll move on to, yes.
Kevin, you good?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll move on to the Capitals Improvement Fund. Capitals Improvement Fund, fiscal year 20, it was at $2,009,000. Fiscal year 21, the city provided us $2,001,000. The actual budget for fiscal 20 inflated to around 3.4 million. Again, that was for money donated to us or taken from a restricted fund and put into a project within Fund 980. So that's the main driver of that decrease. And as we go through fiscal year 2021, you'll see that that budget adjusts upward as we receive donations or use restricted dollars for projects. Moving on to the Commissioner Fund, this is a Fund 430. There's a 5.5% increase. In fiscal year 2020, the Commissioner Fund was at $1,571,000. The proposed 21 Commissioner Fund budget is $1,659,000. This is a 5.5% increase in the Commissioner's Fund. The large increase here is driven by mainly the supplies. So supplies is increasing significantly because one of them is Pyatt Park. Looking at the the planning and design team having money available for Hyatt Park for improvements, as well as one thing that I've noticed throughout my short term being here is a lot of the operational leaders need mulch, and they're always trying to figure out where to obtain the mulch from. And it's usually out of the commissioner. Some of it's out of the commissioner fund, some of it's out of the general fund. They kind of just patch it together. But this would free them up with $30K in mulch, so they know where to go to obtain their mulch versus trying to just piecemeal together. And it also frees up those other dollars for other things that they need from a supply standpoint, as well as $40K for Sawyer Point. This is a restricted fund, waterfront fund for Sawyer Point. So giving the associates the ability for money for Sawyer Point. This comes from the Greater Cincinnati Foundation, or BOV. We are provided $147,000 annually down there. So looking at using some of that money and providing the operations and planning and design team additional dollars for the supplies that they need down there. There was an increase in the IT. IT has a minimal budget dollars. They really have. And last year we were fortunate. We needed around 80,000 and 90,000 because of the Windows upgrade, but we had additional dollars left in the general fund to pay for that. But the IT budget is really at a minimal, and whenever there's items needed, it's really difficult for the IT team to be able to pay for items needed for operations and planning and design, as well as an increase for the, let's see, and looking at the carousel, now this is a decrease amount. So we encumbered in the fiscal year 2020 budget about $200K for the carousel. Only $100K has been encumbered and still encumbered. So there is a $100,000 and went from $200,000 to just $100,000 budgeted for that. And that really covers that increased amount.
Craig?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. I think it's important when you're talking about the carousel that, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's an in and out from the standpoint that I believe the foundation is providing that $100,000 that we then turn around and give to the carousel operator. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So just for clarity on that.
Yes. And commissioners, when you look at the one of the attachments, it's the budgeted items for the by fund name. You'll notice that the carousel fund, I believe we have around 93,000 in there prior to receiving the money from the Parks Foundation. So after the 200,000 does go to Amplio, that 93,000 will still be in there.
Mr. President?
Yes, Commissioner Thomas.
Question, Craig, on number 3, the IT budget. Correct me if I'm wrong. We had a discussion a year or so ago about upgrading Wi-Fi capability in some of our venues so that they would be more attractive for rental. Does that ring a bell for you at all?
President Leonard, Commissioner Thomas, yes, that is something we are working with. And that would actually come out of fund that is not in this budget.
Okay.
This is more for general things, because example would be, we needed, the other day, Gene approached me needing walkie-talkies for the associates, and walkie-talkies are not cheap. So it's around $3,000. And right now, they're only, the IT's only provided around 17,000 in a budget on the general fund side. So that would absorb a good portion of that budget going on just in July. So this gives them the opportunity to upgrade any items that we need, hardware, software, as well as the flex. And that's really what it's for, because I know the IT team really scratches for anything. And a lot of times the money's not there to support the operations with their IT needs.
Okay, so the discussion we had about those upgrades to facilities, that is separate from, because I looked at that and thought $20,000, that doesn't sound like a lot. That is separate from this?
Yes.
And
So
handle,
those are separate.
okay,
Yes, Commissioner Thomas.
thank you.
And when we receive those dollars and we move forward with the project, that would be something we would provide to the commissioners for approval.
Great, thank you.
I'll just make a final comment that the, Mr. Sherman worked very diligently with the staff to present you with accurate numbers. To really look at the expenses of our operations and to present you with a budget that reflects actual costs.
Thank you, Director Kish. And also, that is something I do want to bring up. During this time, I know I had a wonderful plan of sitting down with everybody, and I do have to give it out to the operations and planning design team and business services, to where I wasn't able to meet in person. My staff wasn't able to be able to meet in person with them, but we did go through this through calls and WebEx to make sure that everybody really has what they need, as well as identifying funds that weren't really provided to them in the past, that they know that they do have those dollars for their operations, to use those dollars for operations, as well as for the investment committee. I do want to talk about the investment committee. The investment committee met, and in that dialogue, the investment committee proposed a 2% distribution amount for this next fiscal year. And in past, we always went between 3 to 5%. The 2% was identified really because of the market volatility right now, and understanding that we do have a significant amount sitting on the funds or in the funds within PNC Bank. So moving a larger amount, 5%, when you already have a significant dollar amount in reserves, didn't really make much sense. So the investment committee is recommending a 2% distribution amount, and that equates to $342,541. So the staff recommends that the board approve the attached fiscal year 2021 all funds budget and accept the recommendations from the investment committee for the distribution of the $342,540 and approval of the fiscal year 2021 Commissioners Fund budget.
Thank you, Craig. Very good job. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
The other thing I want to give Craig a lot of credit for is that he has presented to us this year a clearer idea of restricted versus unrestricted. So in the schedules that he's given us, it's clear that even though we have a projected balance in our Commissioners Fund of close to $5 million at the end of the 2021 fiscal year, only 1.4 million of that is really unrestricted that we could tap into for other expenditures. So Craig, this really helps us sort of put it into perspective that with those funds, what is it that we have that is somewhat at our disposal or direction. The other thing that I will mention that I think is a positive, as in the last discussion there with taking out only 2% distribution from our endowments, you will see that the budget that's been presented here, I believe, is a good conservative budget, because even with only taking out 2%, we still are ending up at the end of fiscal year 2021 with a $5 million number in the Commissioners Fund. So I think that does show two things. Number one, we're managing this budget well, but then number two, it also shows that we do have another $1.4 million of discretionary or unrestricted funds that could be used out of this fund.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? We have a motion then to accept the all funds budget presented as is.
I would move that we accept the board staff recommendation approving the all funds budget, the distribution from the endowment funds, and the budgets as presented.
Do you have a second? All right. Roll call vote.
President Linder,
Yes.
Vice President Getz,
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini,
Yes.
Commissioner Flynn,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right, thank you. Good work, Craig. And well done on the investment committee too. I like the recommendation of 2%. Okay, Tom Jones Commons bid is up next. And I don't see Steve.
He is with us on the phone.
Oh,
Mr.
okay.
Shuckman, are you there?
I'm here. Can everyone hear me? This is Steve Shuckman.
Yep, we can hear
Steve, you're
you.
looking good this morning.
Thank you.
It's the best, it's the best
Better
you've
than I've
ever
ever
looked.
looked. Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I'm sure you'll remember that we put the Jones Commons project out to bid the first time. It came in over budget. We had $705,000 to spend toward construction. The lowest best bid at the time was $782,000. We made some adjustments and put it back out to bid. We preserved all the essential elements of the design. We made clarifications in the specifications. And the second time around, we had 5 bidders. Bids range from $694,000 to $749,000. We're recommending today the lowest best bid with Cruz Construction for $694,000. And the good news there is it includes the 3 alternates, which are the shelter, the specialty seating, and the foundation for an information kiosk.
That's great.
Great.
Any other questions or comments on the bid?
Hallelujah.
Yeah, really.
Yes. Mr. President,
And
yes.
Chris has openly been in communication with Mr. Jones, also through Jennifer with the Cincinnati Parks Foundation. So we know that our donor is very pleased that we are at this moment. We are as well.
All right.
Yes.
So,
Mr. President,
yes, go ahead, Commissioner.
yes,
Thomas.
I join with everybody in being excited about this information. Look forward to moving forward on this one. Question for Mr. Shuckman relative to the inclusion information, because that was one of the issues with the previous bid. Am I recalling correctly?
That is correct. And when we made a few corrections or a few clarifications that changed the amount of money going to different trades, one of which was the amount of soil that would have to be brought into the site. So new inclusion goals were set, and I don't have those in front of me, but those were lowered this second time around.
Okay, but consistent with the city's requirement, certainly.
Yes, it was the city, the Department of Economic Inclusion, that set the goals the first time, and
Yeah.
then they set the goals the second time. Correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So do I understand that the money's in the bank? Where it's encumbered, right?
Mhm.
And so now when we approve this outfit can immediately begin to work?
Shovel ready.
Shovel ready?
Yep. Steve, do you have a prediction, or do you have a construction date, a start date?
I do not. We could put together a new timeline, but the next step after board action is that the city would issue a contract to the contractor. Once that contract is executed and they're bonded, they would be set to go. And I believe the construction period is 6 months. So I'd say at this point, we'd be looking to hopefully early in the first quarter of next year that we'd be cutting the ribbon.
So not tomorrow, but very soon. Like I said, it's just that final put together of the contract, and we will stay on top of that to have that done very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Chair, I would just add that since Prus does so much work with the city, there shouldn't be extended negotiations over the construction contract on this one. So we would be right to put the pressure on the city to get this executed quickly.
Good point. I'm sure they're very familiar with this process. This is not their first rodeo.
Hardly.
Okay, so with all due haste and not wanting to postpone or delay this anymore, can we have a motion to accept this contract and bid proposal? Second.
Second.
All right. Roll call vote.
President Linder,
Yes.
Vice President Guest.
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini.
Yes.
Commissioner Flynn,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Okay, the last remaining item of new business is what I'll describe as an alphabet soup. So it's an MOU with DOTE and DPS with a GCWW parentheses SMU asterisk on the side. So whatever the hell that is, you know, I'm all for it. So anyway, Steve, you're gonna create some clarity out of all that.
I will try, and of course, to add some initials, we want this ASAP.
Yeah, there you go. Very good.
It's an interesting situation in that for over 40 years, at least 44 years that I could trace back, the Department of Public Works, that later broke into two different departments, Transportation Engineering, DOTE, and the Department of Public Services, DPS, they have been maintaining, paving, repairing, patching, and lighting a list of park streets that we've always thought of as through streets. And that's because these streets, like Eden Park Drive, connect to the city street system. Eden Park Drive, as an example, connecting from Gilbert to Park Avenue and Victory Parkway. What was pointed out to us recently is under the Cincinnati Municipal Code, these departments should not have been doing all this maintenance and repair and lighting because by code, they could only do that body of work on officially designated city streets. So essentially what the law department has confirmed is that our park roads, our park through streets, again, like Observatory and Old Park and Eden Park Drive, are treated as if they were private streets. So we have been working with this alphabet soup of departments to codify this relationship beyond a memorandum that was issued in the 1970s. The law department has advised that we would need a resolution and an ordinance, but that for the time being, we could enter into a memorandum of understanding with these departments to officially designate this short list of streets. By that action, these streets, and I'll read them off, are Eden Park Drive, Art Museum Drive, a section of Martin Drive from Parkside up to Eden Park Drive, and a section of Fulton Street, basically from the circle at Mural Lake out to the park boundaries. That would be one set of streets. Then the main road into Old Park, that's Observatory, through the park, but not including the circle, and then out to Heacon. McFarland Road, which runs from just off of Westwood, from Westwood Northern to Montana. A short street in Avondale, that's Wyndham Avenue, and then a section of Rapid Run Parkway. That under an MOU that these departments, DOTE and Public Services, would continue to plow the snow, repave, fix the curbs, do the work that's needed on those streets, just these specific streets, and also do the lighting of those streets. Lighting is a little bit complicated in that, and I think it's part of your package, there's 34 parks that have lighting that in a sense has been grandfathered in. It's part of the city streetlight circuit, so that there's a circuit and the energy bill and all the repair and maintenance and replacement for all the city streetlights includes these park lights. And some of these park lights aren't even on streets. For instance, Lytle Park, Alsness Park, there's no street running through those parks, but the lighting of the lawns the walkways and steps are all part of the streetlight circuit. So we've been informed by these two other departments that they're no longer taking care of any of those lights. At least under this MOU, they would continue to pay the energy bill and the repair and maintenance bill just for those lights along these streets. One further complication is that the stormwater management utility, which is a part of Waterworks, is responsible for storm sewers and inlets, but again, only in designated public streets. So by virtue of this MOU, SMU, Stormwater, would be willing to take on the maintenance of those storm sewers and inlets, again, just under these streets. Maybe I should stop there if there are questions. The result of this would be that we wouldn't have an added burden of maintenance for these streets, but we would have an added burden of paying the energy costs and all the lighting repair and replacement for the rest of the lights in parks other than on these streets. That has been estimated at $220,000 a year. So yet to be determined is working with the city budget office to find a funding source for those $220,000. That would be the need annually.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Kevin?
Are all these streets up to city code to be accepted as city streets, Steve?
They are. They are. And you might notice in the details in the MOU, stormwater management utility isn't sure that the understructure, that storm sewers are up to code. So one of the things we agreed to was to run a TV camera through them and determine what their condition is to at least bring them up to code so that from here on out, SMU would take responsibility for it.
And then two more questions. One on the lighting. Are they saying that would go off of they in essence would install a new electric meter for those, or are they just to apportion it, or?
That's a good question. For the time being, because it's involved to recircuit the lights and have just park lights on their own circuit and their own meters, basically they would prorate the costs of the lights, essentially take out per light on Eden Park Drive, Art Museum Drive, and so on, would remain with them, and all the others, and that was our question to that department. Well, proportionally speaking, all the rest of the lights in the park system that they are now responsible for, that they estimated at $220,000 per year. And in the future, it's anticipated if there's capital money in the future for DOTE and parks to systematically, or as opportunity presents, break off those circuits into separate circuits. We would do that in the future.
I would just say that we need to double check the numbers.
So
Make
Steve,
Yeah.
the
Is there a
question
number?
on the 220,000, how much of that is power and how much of that is the repairs and maintenance, or has that been established?
We got a budget number from Transportation Engineering for all those lights that will remain ours. So my question to them is, what is the energy cost per year, and what is your typical repair replacement? If a car takes out a light pole, to buy a new light pole or to buy a new fixture. So I haven't seen a breakdown of how much is that is energy and how much of that is repair or capital replacement, but the total working number is 220,000. And that's obviously the current number.
You know, are these old, or are these LED lights that we have an opportunity to, if they're old, to swap out at some point to reduce the energy charge?
The city has been doing, as have we, city has been doing a good job of doing that swap out. so that a lot of them are LEDs. I think they're all LEDs in Eden Park Drive. I should mention that it's been our understanding for years when we build a new park like Smale Riverfront Park, that was never on the streetlight circuit. In Lytle Park, when we ever get to do Lytle Park, those will both be entirely funded by parks. The energy costs on parks, those are separately metered.
Mr. Chair, one final question. I note that Columbia Parkway is not listed anywhere here. And I know that at least portions of Columbia Parkway are park property. We had this discussion a meeting ago or 2 meetings ago where Kay just shows part of Columbia Parkway is designated as right of way, but other parts is just parkland. And in fact, I think streetlights sit on parkland in either of that.
This is the Columbia Parkway. Well, let me back up. The only Park Road that actually was officially designated as part of the city street system was way back in 1932 Central Parkway. You're correct, this MOU does not deal with Torrance Parkway or Columbia Parkway or Victory Parkway. That on those parkways, for the most part, the only land that we own is in Columbia Parkway. It's mostly on the downhill side, and the city has absorbed all the costs for ongoing lighting replacement, and thankfully all the new retaining walls. Something I think we need to look at when we go beyond the MOU and develop an ordinance is specifically looking at those parkways and delineating their responsibility. For some reason, they were not listed in the 1970s in the memo that I referred to, which actually were city bulletins issued by the city saying the Department of Public Works shall take care of these streets. And again, at the time, parkways were not mentioned. It hasn't been an issue. DOT has not said to us, oh, you have to absorb the lighting on the parkways or anything else on the parkways. But I think just so there's no misunderstanding in the future, when we go to a full-fledged ordinance, we will need to sort out parkways. And by the way, the law department is reviewing this now, so we're waiting for a final word from law.
And Steve, would that apply to Westwood Northern as well?
I don't believe so, because it's Westwood Northern Boulevard is a even if it was it's not officially a parkway. It looks like a parkway, feels like a parkway. We may cut the grass in the medians, but it isn't. Just like in Lower Martin Luther King Drive between Central Parkway and Dick Smith, there's some medians there. We take care of them only because UC pays us to take care of them. So we may or may not need to address medians like that in a future ordinance as well.
Mr. President?
Yes.
So just to clarify, what you have in front of you today is a draft of an MOU that has been on the surface approved by the various actors of the MOU. As you said, it's still being reviewed by law, and the intention is to enter into an MOU so that this work can begin today. The long-term intention is to create a formal ordinance that will then stand in perpetuity. This was, Mr. Sheckman worked very actively with representatives from all of these departments. The directors were informed of conversations that they were having, and all directors are in agreement that this is the direction that we'd like to go. So you are being asked today to approve the MOU in substance. Again, with the law department, there may be some small changes to this, but commending Mr. Schuckman's work along with representatives of the various organizations. I think what they've worked towards is a best case scenario for us. It is a partnership where we are assuming slightly more responsibility. As Mr. Schuckman said, we will continue discussions with budget to see if there is a way for us to acquire those dollars to pay for the lighting. If we are unable to receive that, I think that this is still in our best interest to enter into this MOU and proceed with an ordinance.
Mr. Chair, my only reservation too is in this 200,000 additional expense that we are taking on. To date, somebody has been paying for that. DOTE has been paying for it. So if this in fact, in essence, moves an expense, a current expense from DOTE to parks, then I would strongly encourage that we work with budget and finance, either move that budget with this responsibility or find another source rather than coming out of dedicated park funds.
Couldn't agree more. So,
Commissioner,
yes, go ahead.
yeah, let me add just one thing, and it's within the body of the MOU that transportation engineering was not willing to take on guardrails, as you see along Art Museum Drive and Eden Park Drive. They're not willing to take on the retaining walls that are only there to hold up the streets. But in the spirit of collaboration, it just speaks to future needs that we would work collaboratively to find the money if a major capital improvement is needed. And those would be the two ones. If it's a total reconstruction of a street or retaining wall, DOTE did a number of years ago. We persuaded them to do the wood guardrail you see that goes from Mirror Lake up to Crone, because we said we wanted that. It's much more park-like than a typical highway metal guardrail. So that's just something to the future.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Sure.
Any other questions on the alphabet soup?
Mr. President,
Yes, Commissioner Thomas.
I just thinking about the future when this is all settled and transferred, then we will have the responsibility for the cost and the maintenance of lights and roadways.
No, it's just the lights. If you look at the list of park lights,
Okay,
we'd be
right.
responsible for everything on that list except for these streets we've been talking about.
Okay, great, because by this, we're transferring those streets to be city streets. So the city
Correct.
would have responsibility for that. Okay,
Correct.
so the thing that was going through my mind is this. I was thinking about how we have a relationship with the Recreation Commission and all the discussions we've had about they cut the grass here, we cut the grass here, and we were looking for efficiencies there. And so what I'm wondering is, there, as we think about this longer term, is there an opportunity for efficiency where we don't do that, since the city has already been doing the lights I'm thinking about? They've been doing that. Is there a way to just keep doing that and we just pay for it instead of having that be an expense and a task, if you will, that we take on?
Exactly. That our take on it, and we haven't resolved this, but our take on it would be, particularly with new rules, that the bucket trucks, 2 men on every time a light is changed, that we would ask before we go out and hire staff or hire a contractor, we'd essentially have the same department who's been doing it for the last 40 plus years still do the lights and then ID bill us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, Mr. President,
Yes,
Steve,
go ahead, Kevin.
I'm still a little worried about, and I'm most familiar with Blue Spruce Road in Mount Airy Forest, that doesn't have curb. So when it says DOTE will repair and construct from back of curb to back of curb, and when we're talking about SMU, we're talking about stormwater pipes, but I believe that Blue Spruce has surface drainage. In other words, they've got little troughs along the side of the road that take care of the stormwater there. And I don't know about the other roads. I'm just, because I used to drive that and ride my bike there daily, I'm fairly familiar with that one street. If there are other streets like that, this may need to be refined a little bit to address that.
That is, which is why we are asking for it substantially in this form. I did want to point out that Blue Spruce Road would not be on this list. McFarland Drive would be, which has driveways to private houses along it, but Blue Spruce, they were not willing, these departments, to take that on, so that it is so much a part of Mount Airy Forest. That would be ours. And you're correct, there are no curbs on the roads in Mount Airy Forest.
Hey, Commissioner Flynn,
Evan.
you're on mute.
We didn't hear what you said.
I misunderstood because it talks about Blue Spruce Road in the memo. So
Yeah, it used to be, it was one of those streets that they took care of for years, and they're saying no more. That's really part of Mount Airy. And so in the negotiations, we said, okay, fine. And I have biked up that street when it was in far better condition. It's quite a grade.
but you're tough enough to do it.
Thank you. Used to be.
Mr. President,
What they were trying to,
Go ahead, Commissioner Thomas.
just a quick question. I have never heard of Woodward Park on Wyndham in Adelaide.
Nobody has. It's a street. If you come down Wyndham right off of Reading Road,
Yeah.
west, just south of Forest, it
Uh-huh.
just comes down past houses, goes through a little green space, and connects to Forest. And that green space it goes through after the houses stop, turns out it's part of the park system. It's probably an extension of Victory Parkway. So it's obviously there's no facilities there. There's nothing but grass and trees.
That's right. I thought that was somebody's property that they just didn't build on.
No, that would be ours.
Okay, thank you.
Kara.
you know, what this MOU really does, as Mr. Scheckman referred to it in the beginning of his presentation, is that following a review of the solicitor's office is that DOTE and these other organizations cannot utilize their funds to make any repairs to these roads unless we enter into this agreement. So really what this is doing, and with the willingness of those departments to identify the roadways and the lightings that are identified here, is to offer us as parks that coverage from those funds that they have to donate. As you pointed out, there are some losses, things that we were originally not caring for that we will now care for. But I think we've substantially negotiated a good path forward for us.
Well, it was a good run while it lasted, but now I guess it's time for us to pay the bills, huh? So.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
Chair, I will say that I agreed with Vice President Getz's comment about most of these expenses were in some city budget and we just need to shift them over. But there's at least one where we're talking Blue Spruce Road, where they had the entire amount. They were getting paid to maintain that road. And now we're taking on that responsibility. And that's not included in the $220,000 that is set forth in there. So there's additional cost shifting that needs to occur because we don't have that money in our budget either. And I will tell you that Blue Spruce Road is in horrible condition.
Okay, anybody else? So can we have a motion to accept the MOU between all of these various entities, understanding that it is fairly final draftish, but not exactly completed?
I think we're
Yes.
just within-
Please.
Because of what you just said, Kevin, on the Spruce Road. So is it in DOT's budget, is there a dollar amount that's given to supposedly the maintenance of that road that hasn't been being spent? Can we ferret that out? So that we know,
Steve, are you
because now they're saying
familiar?
they don't want that in the MOU, they don't, and yet they have supposedly been taking care of it.
Yeah, I couldn't quite make out what you're saying. They were not, this was a true negotiation, and they weren't willing to take on Blue Spruce. We didn't get a number for that, but we were planning within our capital budget, because it's just been patched here and there, to repave the street and get it into a condition that it's going to be much easier for us to maintain in the future.
So that is a significant expense that we are just assuming that we are going to take out of our capital budget.
Correct. We have an amount for it to take care of roads, and so that's where that budget would be coming out of. I believe it's the new fiscal year 21 budget.
I'm very confused. So they never were taking care of that road?
They have not been doing a very good job of taking care of that road. They have done some patching, but as Kevin knows, and anyone who's driven down it, it's in very bad shape, and it needs to be repaved.
Yeah, there's a steep hill that runs on the side of Mount Airy Forest where the Arboretum is. There's a steep hill past the Arboretum that runs down to Shepherd Creek Road that has been patched probably for the last 30 years without any repaving of it. And again, because it doesn't have storm sewers in it, it takes a beating. So I'm glad to hear that there's a plan for repaving the whole road, but it will be a significant cost, and we just need to be aware of that.
And just that it was tough even when these streets were under the care of Public Works and their succeeding departments. We in some cases had to wait years until they got around to doing repaving of streets in a certain part of the city. So actually, I'm happier that this would be under our control.
All right, anybody else? Okay, so can we have a motion to accept this MOU?
In substance.
In substance, not exact. Anybody?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call vote.
President Linder,
Yes.
Vice President Getz.
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini,
Yes.
Commissioner Flynn,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right,
Thank you.
that's it for the new business. And moving along to the old business, Kara's going to speak to us about the annual business plan.
Yes. So it is July. Our fiscal year, as you're aware, ended on June 30th. And so we owe you a review back on fiscal year 20 and our achievements of the annual plan. You have been provided with kind of the summary, which is what I would like to present to you today, as well as some detailed accounting of our achievement of our goals that we set. So if you'll indulge me, I will read this for the public. These are my comments to you as your director of a review of our annual fiscal year 20 annual business plan. So our annual business plan is designed to publicly announce our priorities of the Cincinnati Park Board and to provide metrics by which the Park Board is judged to be successful as an organization. Goals were designed and metrics were set to measure our success, signifying that we are meeting our commitment to the citizens of Cincinnati. Fiscal year 20 did not go according to plan. An extraordinary set of circumstances impacted operations of the Cincinnati Park Board, which spanned from October of 2019 through June of 2020. These impacts consisted of the transition of the director, the arrival of COVID-19, and the impacts of COVID-19, which included a loss of 100 employees through a temporary emergency leave program, closure of major portions of our operations, and the ongoing and all-consuming operational impacts of the pandemic. To review the fiscal year 20 annual business plan is to find that the Cincinnati Park Board fell short of our expectations for ourselves. Most goals are still ongoing, and completion has been extended into fiscal year 21. Several goals were achieved despite challenges, and some have been rendered irrelevant or impossible to achieve or resume in the near future. As your director, I accept that we fell short, and I assume full responsibility for our shortcomings. In the same breath, I wish to also express pride of our team. We may have fallen short, but it is my belief that we did not fail. Each member of our team answered their civic responsibilities and was successful where required. We coalesced as a unit in the wake of the director transition and merged as a complete team to solve for an unprecedented, urgent crisis. Upon reflection of what we have achieved during fiscal year 20, I believe that we were a success and by any metric met our commitment to the citizens of Cincinnati. Most importantly, in fiscal year 20, we kept our patrons and our staff safe and our parks open. I would like to point out some specific successes of our accounting and finance division, led by Mr. Craig Sherman, our CFO and division manager, and our business services division, led by Mr. Rocky Mers, division manager. Both divisions were able to achieve goals identified in the annual business plan in the early part of fiscal year 20, which transformed our operations. Mr. Sherman managed a meticulous overview of our financial records and our budget structure to professionalize and refresh our accounting and finance operations. His entire team should be credited with the detail and the dedication to detail. Mr. Mers oversaw a restructuring and an expansion of the business services team, including public relations, targeted marketing, and centralization of volunteer coordination. Collectively, these efforts streamlined and enhanced our services and professionalized portions of our operation, which required attention. Our planning, design, and facilities division, led by Mr. Stephen Chuckman, persistently pushed forward to advance several major capital projects. Aspects of capital projects which required collaboration and cooperation of multiple city departments and third parties continued under Mr. Schuckman's direction, and although slowed, were never halted. The entire team should be credited that we enter fiscal year 21 with many projects in motion and ready for completion. Additionally, the facilities team were a dedicated and active resource during the COVID-19 crisis. Finally, our operations divisions, led by division managers Ms. Jenny Mobley and Mr. Larry Parker, are the unsung heroes of fiscal year 20. Under their respective leadership, they helped to shape and develop a dedicated team which unfailingly served the citizens of Cincinnati in their time of greatest need. Each and every day of the COVID-19 pandemic, Ms. Mobley and Mr. Parker were working through solutions that met the needs of the day, sometimes changing hour by hour. Their tireless and endless work is what allowed the Cincinnati parks to remain open as a place of recreation and respite for our community, and successfully served as an essential service. This momentum and renewed sense of purpose will propel the Operations Division to resume working towards their goals. However, we are not yet at a moment where we can resume goal planning in full force. As we enter year fiscal 21, many of the challenges that we faced in fiscal year 20 are still prevalent in our work and will affect us for months to come. The first half of fiscal year 21 will be dedicated to advancing 4 goals. Those include, number 1, the continuation of capital projects. Number 2, the continuation of operations, modifying and adapting them as necessary as COVID-19 related issues progress. Third will be a restructuring of the organization as a result of the impacts of the early retirement incentive program. We will work in cooperation with the Budget Office and the Office of Performance and Data Analytics. Just so everybody is aware, our employees have until August 31st to inform us whether or not they intend to enter the ERIP program, which will allow for retirements as early as September 1, as late as January 1. And then finally, preparing an annual planning document for you for the second half of July or of fiscal year 21, which will include the dates of January 1st through June 30th. In summary, when reviewing the fiscal year 20 annual business plan, it is safe to say that we collectively did not get where we were planning to go. We were not alone. We are finding our way through along with the entire world. I am so proud of the team here at Cincinnati Parks. I am grateful for your support and the support of city leadership, specifically Mayor Cranley and former city manager Patrick Duhaney. What we can celebrate is that we've had incredible leadership ready to step in and take heightened responsibility for their respective divisions with dedication, vigor, and passion. We can celebrate that we had a full team who understood their respective roles within our organization and executed with a commitment to excellence. And finally, we can celebrate that we served in a time of crisis. The community has paid us back with expressed gratefulness for our work, both through their words and through the smiles on their faces. I am confident that at the turn of the year 2021, we will be ready to focus on the next steps we will take to enhance the essential service of Cincinnati Parks. I am more than happy to take any detailed questions that you have about goals that we set. And our team is also available to answer those questions as well.
Well, I would just say, I'm sure I speak for all of the commissioners that we're all very impressed with you and your staff, and commiserate with what you've gone through, and just think you all have done an outstanding job over this very, very difficult period of time. And I'm just very, very thankful that we have you as our leader, as well as just such a great core of really dedicated and outstanding staff.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Kevin.
I would echo your comments and say that to Commissioner Kish that she's getting recognition across the city. I had a discussion with Sherry Coolidge from the Enquirer, who was just overflowing with praise. Apparently, Director Kish, I think I called you Commissioner Kish, I apologize. Director Kish was on the podcast that she hosts last week, and she could not have been more complimentary. So kudos.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, moving on then. And we look forward to the fleshed out version for the second half.
Thank you.
Staff comments. That's you, right, Rocky?
Yes, sir. Good morning again, everybody. We just did this a couple weeks ago, so not a whole lot to mention, but there are a few things I wanted to point out. First off, Commissioner Thomas, last time you asked about Eden Park, and you're correct. the Twin Lakes area is open to vehicular traffic at this time. Right now, staff has been, and Parks leadership has been meeting with the Citizens United against the closure of the overlook at Eden Park, local residents of the Twin Lakes area, as well as city and police department representatives to continue to work out other ways to deal with some of the issues present in that area related to noise and safety and some of the things that we're aware of. So that is an ongoing discussion to develop additional solutions. And as that continues, we'll certainly keep you all abreast of the latest of what's happening.
A question on that? When we voted to close the street, there were a couple of things that I'm recalling that were the motivators. And one was, of course, the governor's shutdown of activities in the state, and our concern about safety as it relates to people transversing one part of the park to the other, having to cross traffic in doing so. With the opening, is there any sense of how that is going? Those two concerns that motivated us to take that step in the first place. Are we better? Are we about the same? Or what is the situation as best you know?
I can speak to having heard from people that live in that area. And things that are getting dangerous. The motorcycles are speeding through there and squealing brakes. It's to the point that this one resident that lives up the street doesn't go to that park anymore because it is too dangerous to cross the street during certain hours and so forth. In regard to that, as you're working with the police and working with the residents and working with the other folks that want it open, is there any discussion about putting speed bumps on Eden Park Drive?
On that.
Rocky, I'm happy. Yes, we are continuing to look at all options that will allow us to enhance that park. What it really came down to is that we determined that we were not meeting our or infringing upon social equity at the park by not allowing parking within that site. That for us to truly meet the needs of citizens for a regional park, a destination park, that parking on site needed to be available. But to your questions and your comments, some of the issues that were present prior to the closure of the gates are still present, and that is not limited to Twin Lakes. There are ongoing discussions that we continue to have with the Cincinnati Police Department. For Twin Lakes specifically, I am very pleased that we now have the relationships with people who we feel can help us make a difference in that area, and we will continue those discussions. The safety aspects are things that we're still concerned about, and we'll be taking some steps in order to, and speed bumps is one of the topics that we are having conversations about.
Can I just add that in our earlier discussion about who owns the street, can we look at this issue quickly? Because if, as we now, before the MOU is signed, where we give the city our street, perhaps we should evaluate, can we get speed bumps put in there quickly while it's still ours?
Mr. President, question on that.
Yes, go ahead.
When I was looking at the map on the street, I was under the impression that we're talking Eden Park Drive from Gilbert Avenue to Victory Parkway, and not the road that goes around the lake.
I believe Commissioner Thomas is correct. Steve, can you clarify whether or not the roadway at Twin Lakes is included in the previous MOU or not?
Yeah, you're correct. This is Steve again. You're correct. That's the road in Twin Lakes is called Lake Drive, and that was never on the list. It's a park
Right.
road.
So that is still ours?
That's
Yes.
ours.
Yes.
But
And-
the answer to it quickly is something that we do intend and wish to proceed with.
And I just wanted to clarify my earlier comment about having taken the vote on the basis of the governors putting the state basically on lockdown. We knew that, and we agreed that our parks would be open and available to people. But as I understood it, the concern was that there was a heavy concentration of people not respecting social distancing. That was part of the motivation for our taking that vote.
That's my recollection as well.
Okay, and so that was the other question I was wondering about. Do we have any idea about how that is working since we opened?
We are still having crowds in parks. We reopened the facilities that we had closed due to COVID. That included Twin Lakes as well as McAvoy Park. And we are still having some crowds. I would say at Twin Lakes, it's not constant, but it does happen. But we are, Twin Lakes is not a solitary point of concern at the moment. It's kind of a larger city issue that crosses both our properties, CRC properties, and other spaces. But, the timeline in which we had these discussions and you made some decisions collectively as a commission, information has changed and the world has changed in every minute since then. And it has changed since we decided to open the facilities. So I think at this point, we are looking for, rather than closures, we are looking for alternate means to continue to address some of the problematic issues. With Twin Lakes specifically, as I said, I am motivated and grateful that we now have some direct relationships with park users that we can use to enhance those relationships and hopefully impact some change at that park.
Yeah, Kara, I would just add to that. As she indicated, there always have been some particular areas in our parks that have been problematic relating to COVID. And so part of it is just a larger education campaign for people and raising awareness about the importance of, even if you're out in a park, if you're not in an area that you can stay socially distanced, make sure you're wearing a mask. And overall, I think really for the whole city, from my observations, that's improved. But as people learn how to deal with these new sets of rules about what we can and can't do, but obviously there's still issues. As Kara indicated, they're looking in terms of improvements to the area would include things like speed humps, crosswalks that could be added. Steve, feel free to jump in, but I know he's had some conversations with transportation department about that. Signage. Was there some additional signage that could be helpful? And then just keeping that discussion going with the residents and the police department, so that when and if enforcement is needed to make sure that people are staying safe, that could be part of it. So I think it'll be a combination of several of those things. All right. Well, then I'll move on. We wanted to let you guys know that we're very excited and grateful that we're going to be bringing the Relief program back this year. You may recall that last year we took a big step forward in terms of our outreach and and the work that Urban Forestry did, where we gave out over 800 trees to property owners in the city. It was a very big success for us. This year, we're glad to announce that we're going to be working in collaboration with our longtime partners, the Parks Foundation, and also our new partners, which is Mad Tree Brewery. They have stepped up to help fund the program. And the really exciting thing is that in addition to money, for the trees, they're also, it's really part of their mission at Mad Tree Brewery. They really want to get behind this and support it through education. They've got a large network that we'll be able to sort of advertise through too. They're going to be letting us use their parking lot to give out the trees when we get to October. So we've got a lot of fun things. I don't want to give too much away that are being planned, but I think you'll all appreciate what we're going to be doing there. And so that program opens up applications in August, and then the trees are given out in October. You'll be seeing that launched very soon.
Mr. Chair, quick question on that one. I know the total number was up significantly last year. Do you have a percentage? How much of an increase was it versus the year before?
I can send you the exact numbers after the meeting, but it seemed
okay.
the year before it was somewhere.
I do have them. And this is an overall planting goal, not specifically related to the ReLeaf program, but an overall planting goal. The goal for last year was 875, and as you'll recall in the annual plan, that was included an increase of 175 trees. So our goal was 875. We planted 1,122 plants. It was a 60% increase over fiscal year 19.
That's wonderful. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that just ReLeaf, or is that's everything? That's ReLeaf.
In the parks. Yes.
Okay.
But just ReLeaf, and again, I can send you these afterwards.
Yeah.
I think we did around 180 or 200 trees.
Yeah, it was about 200 the previous year is what I recall.
So this is
it was a huge
difference.
And we really kind of kicked the tires on it and just took a fresh approach with our outreach and how we were getting the word out. We got a great response for it.
Yeah.
This year, we expect it'll be strong as well because they've made changes. So for example, people can plant the tree in their backyard, which is something they haven't been able to do before.
Yeah.
So we're excited. And again, with the help of our partners, we really think we're going to have another strong year.
Great. Thank you.
So the thought that occurs to me is I would be interested to know, of those 875 trees, how many of them are still alive? And I know that it's probably impossible, but that might be a, kind of an intriguing thing to add to the program is a year later, send us a picture of your tree, and is it still alive or is it dead? And I think if you recall a few meetings ago, Crystal had said it took 10 trees to have one survive 70 years. So, and I might be off a little bit, but got to plant a lot of trees to get them to get really old. So be a kind of an interesting element to add to that program is because the whole point is not just planting them, but making them grow and keeping them alive.
Yeah, certainly concur with that. That's a great idea. And we'll check back with them on sort of what efforts they take to track the trees going forward. Yeah. I know they use Google Maps and other things initially, but in terms of longer term, that's a good question. And then the other thing I was going to mention is that in terms of our engagement, we've learned a lot of things during the time of COVID. But one thing that we've learned in looking back at some of our digital engagement numbers on social media, it really, with all the interest we've had in parks with COVID, we weren't sure what exactly to expect, but our numbers have surged through all.
We didn't hear the last minute or two.
Okay. So I was just saying that, in the times of COVID, we weren't exactly sure what to expect. What would it mean for some of our outreach efforts? But we are tracking the numbers now. And in looking back at our digital media efforts, we saw a large spike for social media platforms. And a lot of that is because of COVID and everything's going more digital, like our meetings here. And it's by no means our only tool, but it is a very important tool and it continues to be so. So just for example, we had a goal for the year of increasing our Instagram followers by 10%. And in the first 6 months of this year, we already grew it by 20%. And that's just one indication. I won't bore you with a lot of numbers, but what it has led us to do is we've decided to expand our social media tools, and we just got a presence on Nextdoor. So you'll be seeing us there. That's always been a tricky one because of some of the rules with Nextdoor, and it's geographically based. And so it's hard to have an enterprise account for an organization like ours. And there's some restrictions, but the two big things that Nextdoor is going to allow us to do is, number one, we can post outward, we can post outgoing messages to neighborhood groups, which is going to be great. It'll just be one more place people can find information about things like Relief or some event in a park. And then secondly, when there's complaints or issues, they can often take off like wildfire on Nextdoor. And this will allow us to, when something does happen, be able to monitor it and respond more quickly to the community's concerns right there on that platform. So I just want to let you know you'll be seeing us there. And then the other thing I was going to mention is, on the digital tools, we have a video that we wanted to play, but we weren't totally sure about the technology with that today. So I'll send that link to you after the meeting. And on that point, I also wanted to give a big shout out to Mary, who has worked very hard to have this meeting go off seamlessly, figuring out the technology and how to host a meeting at our admin building, which gives us much greater flexibility as opposed to trying to work through City Hall. And this is probably how things are going to be looking for the foreseeable future. But I can assure you, Mary, some of your anxieties were paid off and everything went great. So thank you, Mary.
I think we need to give her a sitting ovation.
Oh, thank you.
Great job, Mary. Thank you.
That's it for me.
Thank you, Rocky. Any questions for Rocky? All right. Moving on to commissioners' comments.
Okay, I got some today.
All right.
And just to remind everybody, we cannot,
No deliberation.
Commissioner Castellini, have at us, but we cannot deliberate. And if there's anything that you would like to see on the next agenda for discussion, we'd be more than happy.
It really hasn't anything to do with discussion. It's just some comments that I like to make. And one has to do, we used to get a police report at every meeting. And I kind of miss it. And I wondered what happened to that. Okay, that's number one.
I think Wade eliminated that.
I can speak to that briefly. What happened was that the police department used to assign a police officer to be our official liaison with the Parks Department. That was Captain Neville. He retired a little over a year ago, and we've not been assigned a new liaison. We have asked about that. I know everybody has responsibilities, and so now it's been happening more on a park by park basis. So we'll work with District 5 when things arise in those areas. Things like Twin Lakes was obviously downtown section, but also Assistant Colonel Newdigate was directly involved in that. So we just haven't had that one point of contact, and that's why we stopped receiving the report a little over a year ago.
So, all right.
Look into it.
Okay, the second point, I'm going to take this off. This was brought to me by my daughter, and she was down in Smell Riverfront Park. And she said, Mom, I've never smelled so much marijuana as I smelled down at Smell Riverfront Park. So I just bring that to your attention. Now, I know, I don't think the law is such that we're supposed to be able to smoke marijuana recreationally. I think it's supposed to be only for medicinal purposes, right? And I don't know if it's a big deal, a bad deal. I don't know if it's something we certainly don't want going on in our parks. I'm old fashioned, of course, I personally don't want it going on in our parks, but just a comment.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Kevin.
not to engage in a discussion on that topic, but I believe that city council took an action earlier this year or late last year that said that city, directing city police not to enforce any laws, not even to give out tickets related to smoking marijuana. So there's a city issue involved there.
Didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, and I would just say we'll certainly note that. And what I'd like to do is follow up with Jenny and see what else we can learn about some of the, what they're experiencing and what some of the strategies are. I'd be happy to report back.
Thank you, Rocky. Other comments from, you have any other?
No, I'm done.
About anybody? Just quick comment for me. I had an opportunity to ride my bike down the Little Duck Creek Trail. I'm not sure whether that was legal or not, but I did it anyway. And I will say it's a delightful trail, and those guys, in the Bramble area have done an outstanding job. And I didn't ride it all the way. I rode it to where it teased into the creek, and I found two pieces of broken old statue that was maybe about this big. So I put it back together again and set it aside. I'm not sure if it's still there. So whoever takes care of that, look for that little statue that I put back. Didn't have a head. It's got a torso and legs, but that's it. That's all I have to report. Voila. We're rounding third and heading for home then, apparently. So our next scheduled meeting is not special. It will be routine. And it is August, was that 20th?
Yes.
August 20th. And it's 11:06, so I think we did pretty well. And we have a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So,
Mr. Chair, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
That's all right.
But at the last special meeting, someone, and it was reflected in the minutes that we were going to request an executive session update on the pending litigation concerning Lytle Park. Is that held for the next regular meeting?
We can host that at any time. We can do that at the next regular meeting as well. A privileged and confidential email was sent to you. Did you receive that, Commissioner Flynn?
Yes, I got that. I didn't know whether there was going to be executive session related to it because there are questions related to that as well.
Sure, we can host that executive session at any time. We can call a special meeting for the sole purpose of entering into executive session, or we can attach it to the next regular meeting.
I have no great desire to have another special meeting, but certainly, I think there were enough questions from commissioners related to that it would be good to have executive session at the next meeting.
I would agree. So we'll throw that on the agenda, and I believe it's in the bylaws that you can't have 3 special meetings in a row. So we're going to have to go back to the regular one. All right. So motion to adjourn. All approved.
yes.
All right. We're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you too. And that's here, right? We'll meet in here.